We jacked everything off the internet.
Do you have a named lawyer?
It's undisclosed. Well, Nick, thanks for coming on the Hunt for Success podcast. Today we are at the Wendell Museum of Animal Conservation, who will be on the show hopefully next week. And then we're thinking about changing venues. So you might be one of the last guests on the show in this venue.
Oh, I'm lucky to be here. This place is pretty neat, pretty cool place.
So you and I go back about, it probably was 2007. Well, I actually met your in-laws first.
Yeah, it would have been 2009 because we moved back from Arizona 2009.
Okay.
And we'd been hearing about the other Nick and Mindy in Ridgefield for the last 6 months or so over the phone.
So you and your wife were in Arizona.
Yep.
In Phoenix.
Yep.
Finishing school.
Yeah, I finished my doctorate down there.
Okay. And then, I remember when you guys came back because I think your wife's parents really missed you guys. And I don't get it because I have a beard, but I guess you and I look similar. And my wife and your wife look really similar.
Yeah.
And so they kept on taking us out to breakfast and having us over, and I think it just made them feel good to have some lookalikes around. But so when you came back, when you and I met, you were taking your boards.
Yeah.
To be a licensed physical therapist.
Yeah. Yep. So my plan when we got back from Arizona, my plan, I'd been in school for 7 years working on my physical therapy degree and a bachelor's and then doctorate and the likes. And my plan at that point was to go into private practice, outpatient physical therapy, kind of your traditional PT. And when we got to know each other, I was working as a PT on an interim license and studying for my boards, which, I don't know, I took within a few months, and from there it went.
So you and I got along great just from some common interests and being outdoors, hunting and fishing. But we didn't talk. We hadn't seen each other in a while. And then when I ran into you recently, what I thought you were doing with your career totally took a different turn, at least in my view, right?
Right.
My thought was Nick's going to be working as a physical therapist. I just imagine like a skilled nursing facility where you're helping people recover and you're doing that. But and so that was something I could never relate to because I'm not smart enough to be a doctor, right? But I love business. And so when I heard what you were doing with your new company, I was definitely interested in meeting them. I'm like, all right, not only do I want to talk with Nick more to kind of share business development and personal development stories and ideas, but have you on the podcast to hear more about your company. So what's the name of your company? I don't even know yet.
Yeah, Work Right Northwest is the name of our company. Our focus is on injury prevention. So really what we do in the most basic sense of the terms is we put physical therapists into an occupational setting. So big industry, think of like large manufacturing companies or distribution centers or construction, employers with large workforces that are dealing with the impacts of their workers getting injured. And so it really comes down to a system philosophy, and I don't want to be too salesy.
No, be salesy. This is called the Hunt for Success.
Yeah. But essentially, it comes down to a broken system. And so when I talk about a broken system, the way that healthcare is set up and the way that occupational insurance and workers' compensation is set up are programs that I don't feel mesh together real well. So I'm somewhat cynical, but usually you can follow the money and find out where the incentives are for people. And in the medical system, and this is the route that I started going with private practice PT facilities, was it's a fee-for-service industry. So when I provide a treatment to you, I get paid a percentage of that treatment. So the more treatments that I provide, the more money I make as a provider. And that's the way traditional medicine is in general. But at the same time, if I were in that traditional medical model and I prevent an injury, I stop an injury from occurring, and I keep someone healthy, I don't make any money because I didn't provide any treatment for that. I only make money when I've got my hands as a provider on your sick or broken or injured person. I don't have money by keeping you safe or healthy, which is backwards in my opinion.
Sure.
I mean, I think if you think of general industry or general business, you'd think that's foolish. We know preventative maintenance and routine, machinery inspections and maintenance with respect to that makes so much more sense than waiting for the machine to break. But when it comes to our people, we wait for our people to break, and then we pay to fix them. And when we pay to fix them, we throw them into an industry where the providers are paid, on a fee-for-service schedule. So the more services they provide, the more money they make. So the incentives are not at keeping your people safe and healthy. They're at waiting for them to break and then capitalizing them on them being broken. And so I guess the 3-minute, introduction to WorkRight is we go the opposite direction. So we put providers on site into these corporations to become a part of their fabric with the entire incentive on trying to get ahead of someone being broken, giving them the tools to keep themselves healthy rather than waiting for them to break. And then we don't pay on a fee-for-service basis. We just pay them a flat salary, and the more people they can help, the better off we are and the better off the company is. So that's the model that we've gone with.
And when we were having breakfast the other day, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of competition in this.
Yeah, I mean, there's some. It's not a new concept. It's something that's been around for. NIOSH is the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. It's kind of the government agency that researches safety in the workplace. They did a white paper study on this type of a program in 1988 in the meatpacking industry. So it's
Really?
not new. It's not a new theory at all. But what it is an industry that's gaining steam, but there's not a ton of competition just because there's not a ton of people that understand business and understand healthcare. There's a lot of people that understand healthcare. There's a lot of people that understand business. There's not very many that understand both in this space. So, yeah, we've been growing exceptionally fast and really been blessed to go where we want to a degree.
So are you attracted to the business side of it?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So that's always been my main focus. So my grandpa, I can remember I was probably 7th or 8th grade, talked to me. I mean, he was a business person, and back then he really drove home the fact that anyone can run a successful business. What you really need is your niche to be able to thrive. And so his encouragement early on, 7th, 8th grade, was find your niche, and then from there you can make of it what you want. And physical therapy was always just my niche. I never wanted to be I knew I was never going to be the main provider providing treatment to people. I was going to be running clinics, running a business. That was my plan. It wasn't until 4 or 5 years ago that I began to think that really my plan should probably be more focused in the workplace rather than in a traditional outpatient setting. And I wouldn't look back. It's the best thing that ever happened to me.
So I know a little bit about the circle you run in, and there's guys like Craig and a lot of other people that go to our church that have they played a role in being interested in business and thinking of a physical therapy role from a business standpoint?
Yeah, well, Craig is my father-in-law, and without a doubt, he's a awesome person and a huge influence in my life. He's definitely one of my role models and mentors. So I go to him all the time to run things off him and to push him. With respect to thinking in a more non-traditional method about using the skill set to build a company and build an organization, he supported us in that decision. I wouldn't say he pushed me in the idea. He pushed me in starting. I worked for another firm in a similar space prior to starting WorkRight, and I never really expected to leave that firm. I figured I would end up buying them out at some point. And things changed and stuff changed. And Craig was one of the key people, along with my dad, both, at pushing me, saying, you need to go on your own now. Time is right. So I would definitely say he's been an encouragement, and he's a key mentor.
Well, it seems like that would be really important to have because you made a big decision early in your career, right? Don't most people go, because my sister is a nurse practitioner, and it would be like similar to her being a nurse practitioner in a hospital or in a family practice for 2 years or less,
Right.
and then deciding to go out and open her own company, open her own practice, right?
Yeah, so I probably surprises people, but it honestly was something I had never thought about or hadn't thought about at all with any realistic expectations until 3 days before I did it. And I'm not making that up. I mean, things changed where I was, and the situations changed, and I felt like, okay, it's now or never. And I decided to go now, and I had the support of people like Craig and my parents and my wife that said, let's go for it. And so we went. And I am a risk taker. I'm generally a confident person.
Did you listen to the podcast with Doug
Yeah.
Menahall? He
Yeah.
talked about risks.
Well, and confidence both, and I did. And I would definitely, say I still have my spark.
Well, I hope so. Was it hard? I mean, you say you're not adverse to taking risks, right? Do you find that something easier said than done? Was it easy? You make it sound like it was easy. Like, 3 days before I'd made the decision, I had thought about it. So, for example, taking the risk to do this podcast, which is like 1/8 of 1% of a similar decision, took me 18 months to finally take the risk and do it.
Yeah, I mean, I knew I wanted to run my own company.
Move that mic up just a little bit closer.
I knew I wanted to run my own company all along, but I just figured it would be the company where I was rather than starting from scratch. And I always put everything I have into everything I do. So I was working with everything I had at the role I had. And so I didn't feel like I was not being challenged, or I didn't have something to keep me stimulated or to keep me excited about what I was doing. But it definitely was challenging, and it was definitely risky, and it was definitely scary. I mean, when we started, let me see, Jackson, my oldest son, was 4, and Cameron was just barely 2 when we started our company. My wife had just decided to stay home with the kids and taken her income out of the picture. So there was multiple factors when we decided to start that were very nerve-wracking. But I was confident that I could do it, and really, by the grace of God, it's been working.
And from the way you describe it, it's working really well in such a short amount of time. And so let me think about this, because your business is nationwide, right?
Yeah, we're not quite nationwide, but we're in a lot of states, is a better way to put it. I think we're in 7 states right now.
Okay, well, you're the closest thing to a nationwide business owner that we've had on the podcast so far. Everyone else has been pretty local.
Mm-hmm.
So how long have you guys been open?
So I officially filed 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
I mean, but that's day 0. I mean, there's no marketing plan. There's no sales plan. That was the first step. File a corporation and get things started, and then figure out your plan for how we're going to make some revenue.
And so when you started out, it was you, and then I'm sure your wife was helping out with books and stuff right off the beginning, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was no books to begin with. So, I mean, there was no revenue for a while. So it really, to be honest, so what I did when I started. I love business, and I love reading about business, and I really love that personal development aspect of it. So I've always been into that. So I've always had ideas and plans, and I guess if I were to call myself something, I would call myself more the idea guy, the kind of the visionary type guy. But I didn't necessarily know how I was going to structure things, and I still don't. We're always developing and improving, but I knew I didn't know yet. So I did. It's how to start a startup. It's a Stanford entrepreneurial course. It's free online. I went through all 18 of them. It's put on by an accelerator program out of Silicon Valley, and it brings in guys like Zuckerberg and.
What's the name of it?
I believe it's been a while, so I believe it's How to Start a Startup. And it's all on YouTube. It's like an 18-week course through Stanford's entrepreneurial school. And really, it just walks you through all the baseline aspects of starting a company. And what it didn't show me how to do it piece by piece. I had developed an advisory board for myself right away. And I had mentors that were telling me different steps, and we had a team of lawyers that were helping. So I had guidance, but what that course did is it really forced me to sit down and think through each thing and take really probably 90 minutes, once a week to plan. And I think that was the most valuable thing I did, because that whole focus, it's a tech-based.
So 90 minutes a week to plan what?
Well, it goes through everything, but really think big picture. And I guess where I was going with that is it made me think about scaling a company from the start, because they're tech companies. They want to be that billion-dollar unicorn company that they talk about. So they're all venture capital supported startups that they're throwing a bunch of money in, hoping that they turn into this massive IPO down the road where these investors can make huge money. So they don't care about a successful small business. They want these companies to turn into conglomerates that sell. And so the whole focus and undertone of this Stanford course was developing things right from the start so that you can grow, and scale and be effective at that. And I had never thought that way before. I knew I wanted to run a successful company, but I didn't necessarily know how large I wanted it to be, and I still don't. But what I do know is I don't ever want to be the limiting factor of my company. And in order to build an organization like that, it can't be about me putting in all the sweat equity and that. It needs to be about using brain power to develop a plan and a system so that we're empowering other people to put in that sweat and be successful and know they'll be successful because we've developed a good enough plan.
By other people, you're talking about employees?
Employees, yeah. And so that we can empower them to really be the boots on the ground. And that course got me thinking that way. And I still think about that. I mean, that's one of my main litmus tests is how is this going to make our team better? And on the flip side, is this something that will develop more than just me? And if it's something that's just developing me, then is it worth it?
So are you time blocking out 90 minutes in your week?
I did then. And I had lots more time than that too, just because we didn't have a lot of clients. But so now I try and read regularly. So I try and block out time where I read some form of a book that I think is going to make me better in the role.
During work, during business hours?
Yeah, during a work week. And a lot of times it's on airplanes now just because I fly a lot. And so I do, and I try and get through. And to be honest, I don't like reading. I'm a high energy, easily distracted person, so reading's not easy for me. But I know that I'm better off if I do it, and so I force myself to do it. And sometimes the books change. Like right now, I'm almost embarrassed to even say this, but I'm reading about relationships and understanding the science behind interpreting people and reading people and old school.
Why would you be embarrassed? I mean,
the embarrassing part is that it's all built off the Enneagram, if you've ever heard of that, like old school. I don't even know what the history of it is, but it's kind of that kind of fringe science, neuroscience type stuff that's maybe got some cultural beliefs tied to it that isn't stuff I would typically dive into. But I think it's intriguing And I don't know why that beeped. It's off. So.
If you need to get it.
No, I just don't know why it did it.
It's okay.
But anyways, yeah.
So it is about how to work with other people's...
How to interpret personalities. And
What's the name of the book? Do you remember?
I can picture the front of it. I'll have to follow
okay.
up. I'm horrible with authors. So it's about the Enneagram. That's generally the topic of it.
Have you heard of the book? I'm sure you read it in school, Emotional Intelligence 2.0.
I've heard a lot of emotional intelligence, and what is it, Daniel Getman, or Daniel
I think so.
Is the kind of the primary thought leader in that space.
That was a game changer book for me.
Yeah.
On many levels, right?
Right.
From family relationships to business relationships. And I think so many people forget about that, or they don't give it the time of day. But if you get really good at emotional intelligence, right? They say you have IQ and EQ. You can't change your IQ, but you can change your EQ.
Right.
And when you read the book, you take a test in the beginning, and then you take a test at the end. But I need to find a better word than manipulate, because that's not the right word. But by understanding other people's level of emotional intelligence, you can get you can reach your goal with that person if you have a very high level of emotional intelligence.
Right.
Right. And so many people in my industry don't take the time to sit there and work on their EQ.
Right.
And I think by having a high level of EQ when you're hiring your staff and working with your staff and building that team like you talked about, where they can go out and work in a confident way, I mean, it could be a game changer.
So we in our company actually train on emotional intelligence, and have a whole training seminar on it specifically, because
Training for your company, or just training you do for other companies?
No, training our employees on emotional intelligence. Because so what we're doing is we're taking traditional clinicians, so physical therapists that are used to being in an outpatient clinic where a doctor refers someone to come to them. They show up to the office and they have their full schedule and they just treat people. That's what they do. They don't really, at the end of the day, have to do anything to keep those people coming. There's a business manager that does it, or clinic managers, or
Somebody
community
billing
relations.
insurance and doing all,
Yeah. But what we do in our setting is we change it. We recognize that the only way we can truly be preventative with someone's health care is to get them to talk about it. Excuse me. Is to get them to talk about it day one, before they have any issues, before they're hurting, before they have problems. The only way they're going to talk to us day one is if they trust us. And oftentimes we're being thrown into a workplace environment where people aren't going to come to us. So we need to have those clinicians go out to them. They'll go out on the factory floor. And
So you're training for emotional intelligence to help your employees
build
trust, rapport and trust and relationships.
Yep.
Within the company you're
Yeah.
helping.
Because once we have that trust, then people don't want to hurt. They don't want to have problems. So they will talk about it with you, but they need to know that you care about them and that you're not there for some ulterior motive, that you're not just a pawn of the organization to keep an eye on them. You're not Big Brother or whatever it is. They need to know that you care about them. Once they recognize that you care about them and you're there to help them, then they're more than willing to talk about it. But clinicians aren't used to seeking people out. They're not used to being salespeople for themselves. They're used to people coming to them. So, and it's sometimes emotionally charged situations. It might be a union environment, a union factory where we've got, tenuous labor situation. And so the workforce just feels like you're a part of management, or management doesn't like the workforce. And you need to find ways to be able to wade between that and engage people.
Oh, these guys are just here so we don't get hurt and the company has to pay a bunch of money.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we train on recognizing triggers so that you can understand when someone's slipping into that. The phrase we use, and it's not something I termed, and it's out there, you may have heard of it before, is the limbic hijack. But essentially it comes down to that neuroscience of when your limbic system's kicking in, it begins to shut off that neocortex, or the logical part of your brain.
So some of us aren't doctors, Nick.
Yeah.
What's the limbric? Is that what you said?
Limbic system
Limbic.
of your
What's
brain.
What's the limbic system?
Well, it gets really complex if I start to dive into the specific anatomy, but we're talking about the hypothalamus and some of these other
Parts of the brain.
Yeah, kind of the like I don't. Do you know who Simon Sinek is?
Mm-mm.
He's a great thought leader. Anyone that's listening to this should listen to Simon Sinek. He's not a doctor. He's purely a business.
Well, normally, Nick, I'd be
advisor.
pulling this all up on the screen,
Yeah.
and so people can be doing their internet searches and everything. But Ryan McCracken called in sick on me last minute, so I can't. I'm having a hard enough time listening to what you're saying and monitoring the audio to do internet searches. But
No, don't worry about
parts of the brain.
Yeah, Simon Sinek gives this in a leadership talk that he talks about, where he has people draw 3 circles around each other. That inner circle is your limbic brain, and he calls it your Homo sapien brain. But essentially, it's your reflexive brain. It's the part of your brain that just acts and reacts. It's your fight or flight system of the brain. So it's not something you control. It's completely an emotional response that's uncontrollable.
So is it like? So it's not. Does that relate to physical responses?
It
too?
does. So it'll
So-
kick in your parasympathetic system, which is it'll centralize blood flow to protect your organs. It allows you to be a little bit faster twitch so you can get away from prey. So essentially it's the fight or flight instinct.
Have you seen? And we're going to get to the other 2 circles, but have you seen on YouTube and on the news they've had virtual reality goggles are getting real
Right.
advanced.
Right.
Well, there's this one where you put the virtual reality goggles on and you're just in a room wherever you're standing, and you have to walk out onto a ledge of a building, and then you have to walk over a balance beam like 100 stories in the air.
Right.
And so there's all these videos on there, and half of the people that have the goggles on can't even step up on the ledge, but they know that they're just standing in a room on regular concrete and they're
Right.
not going to fall. So
Right.
is that
Yeah, I mean, and there's lots of, even before virtual reality, there's lots of good scientific studies showing like you could have a glass floor in an infant that's crawling and they won't crawl over the glass floor if they can see down a long ways, and it's triggers in the brain that just prevent their body from acting. And it's kind of, again, it's that limbic system of the brain that kicks in. The challenge with the limbic system is it's not super effective. So our brains are these massive supercomputers. So you might be able to process in your neocortex, or the outer portion of your brain, that outer circle that I was getting towards, something like 5,000 or 6,000 stimulus per second, like a ton of stimulus, like supercomputer. But your limbic system, that inner portion of the brain that's responsible for keeping you alive, it only does a handful of stimulus per second. So it doesn't do a ton, but when it does kick in, it shuts everything else off. So that supercomputer, 5,000 to 6,000 stimulus per second, it is essentially non-effective when that limbic system's engaged.
interesting?
So your emotion, so where it's important for us, and back to kind of the original training piece of this, is if somebody's emotional and they're thinking me, they're in that fight or flight. They're thinking you're here just to keep me from being safe, or you're here to, upon the management, whatever. We've lost all rational thought. We've lost the ability for them to think logically, for them to think process-oriented, for them to truly think what's best for them, because they're stuck in this protection mode. So as a clinician, what we need to be thinking, or what we focus on, and really I think it would apply to almost any interpersonal conversation, is if you see someone stuck in this emotional point, you can't just keep feeding that fire. You need to try and get them back to where their logical brain's working. And that's where it's Daniel Goleman, I think. I think I said Getman earlier, but he's the kind of the thought leader on this emotional intelligence, where he talks about transitioning then to numbers, to step-by-step processes, to getting somebody to think in real logical aspects to kick them out of that emotional response. So, I can think of clinical examples, but I can't think of a good example here.
Well,
But
before you gave that limbic system analogy, I was picturing. Here's the image I have in my head. I have Costco in my head. I don't know why, but I imagine like a warehouse, right? And you have employees in the warehouse, and they don't want to talk to you because you're the company's PT guy that came in here to do whatever. But I would think you'd want to train the people to go up and become friends with them, and small talk and build rapport with them. But what you're saying is different.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's all part of engaging and building trust. And I guess I probably should give a caveat first. So Costco does have a similar program to ours, but it's not us.
Okay, good.
So that's not us. It's another organization that does a good job. So, but we need to build trust is really what it comes down to. Once we're able to engage that person on a trusting level, then we have the ability to use our skills as a clinician to help keep them healthy, to help keep them safe.
But it sounds like you're building trust in a very analytical way, as opposed to just going up and being nice to somebody.
Yeah.
Because you were talking about if they're operating in that limbic system and the outer circle's not working, you start asking them lots of questions. Is that what you were saying?
You think, you try and get them thinking through processes, or you try and get them thinking through numbers or things that are going to kick them out of that emotional response. And it really does come down to, this is way easier for some people than others. So if someone like yourself is very good conversationally, and it's easy for you to start up a conversation and build rapport with somebody, what we're really trying to do, and I guess my digression was saying, I'm an analytical thinker. And I think if our people recognize this, they're going to be better off. So if they start thinking of tools to improve their ability to connect with people, they're going to connect with people, on a wider base and probably more deeply. And so somebody that's really good at conversations, you're probably going to be better off than somebody who wasn't, but now you're going to be hopefully even better. And the more trusting
by going through the training.
For understanding how the brain works, and for using that tool to look for triggers, to be looking for, type of verbiage that's being used, or clenched teeth, or white knuckles, or it's little signs that you can see that shows kind of that tense, stature that somebody might hold.
Well, and not to keep going back to the Doug Mendenhall podcast, but one thing I can't get out of my mind, I think about it almost every day, whether I'm selling or I'm at work or not, is people like to buy, they don't like to be sold, right? And so
I thought that
my
was good.
limbic system goes off as soon as somebody tries selling me something, right? Because they're not building trust.
Right.
They're trying to force you to buy something, or force you to think a certain way, or they're trying to tell you what to do to a certain point.
Well, really, if you think, and I'm not trying to interrupt, but if you think of that whole phrase, people like to buy, not to be sold, it's limbic on both sides. So when you feel like someone's selling you, you're not in control. So when you're not in control, you're trying to figure out what you need to do to be in control. Whereas when you're the buyer, you're in complete control. Yeah. And so you're in charge of this operation, and then you get gratification for getting to do what you want. So it's all about us. And I don't remember where I read it, but somewhere in the process of our research, someone said 80% of our interactions occur in that limbic system of the brain. 80% of the things that we do in a day-to-day activity are about how does this impact me, and me first. And when I read it, I can remember where I was when I read it, but I can remember thinking, well, that's not true. But then I started tracking over the course of the next couple of days, just randomly, and start thinking, it is. Most of my gut reactions are, how does this impact me? What's this going to do to me first? And it's embarrassing to say that. You don't want to. You want to think, I'm a person that thinks about others first. But at the end of the day, we're hardwired to protect ourselves. And I think we have to focus on trying to take care of other people, because it doesn't always come naturally.
And I've been talking a lot about this too. It's just how to have a conversation with people, because I do get that a lot. Like if I'm at a networking party or around people I don't know, sometimes I'm okay, sometimes not, but I can start up a conversation, and I can, usually when that person leaves, they remember who I am and what we talked about, and I just try to ask questions. Right? You ever play that game where you can only ask questions, so you have to answer a question with a question? Right?
Jeopardy style.
Yeah, but it's like, let's talk and only talk in questions and see who can be the first one that makes a mistake and just says a statement, right? So I do listen to what people say, but I kind of play that game every time I'm with somebody, because people like to talk about themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was at a restaurant the other day doing some work in the bar,
Mm-hmm.
and there were two gals, probably in their late 20s, sitting at the bar, and I was just listening to their conversation. And one person would talk about themselves, and then the other person would talk about themselves,
Right.
and it went back and forth, and it was almost like they were both just having conversations about themselves.
Right.
They just wanted to hear themselves talk,
Right.
right? Somebody would say something interesting, and instead of the other gal responding with a question to know more, she would talk about a similar story about herself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I thought, this is so sad, because this is how most people operate.
Right.
And it's not an easy thing to do, to
Mm-mm.
sit there and not talk about yourself. You know, especially where we're sitting here,
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting because there's probably, 300 animals in here,
Yeah.
stuffed animals.
At least.
And so hunters are very guilty about this, right? So let's say we're in here and I said, man, that's a really nice sheep. The person I'm talking to might say, oh yeah, I saw this sheep at this place, or my dad killed a bigger sheep than that,
Right.
or start talking about it instead of asking that person, oh, that is a cool sheep. Do you know a lot about sheep?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I think we all do it. I'm guilty of it. For sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. But maybe it's that, I don't know if that this relates to that limbic system, but if you can figure that out, you can gain someone's trust just in a simple conversation.
Right. Well, I think
Right.
it entirely relates to the limbic system. I think that was my point, is the majority of our conversations, we immediately go to, how does this impact me?
And once I figured that out, it became really easy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that you're manipulating people, but you want to build a relationship with
Right.
somebody.
Right.
You want to be interested in what they're saying and have them value what you say.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just start talking about yourself, they're not even listening.
Not at all. I agree. Well, and that's where we've gone with it. I think we're better off as a company if we empower our people to think this way. Because at the end of the day, if someone's wanting to talk to a medical provider, they want help. And so it's not about the provider, it's about that person.
So when you're bringing these clinicians on
Mm-hmm.
with this in mind, I would assume you have this in mind when you're meeting them for the first time, right? And you're going through the interview process.
Right. So, yeah, yes and no. I mean, the way they interact and the interpersonal relationship and skills are important. But we've gone a different or a slightly unique route where we truly hire only based on core values. So not only based. You've got to be a competent clinician.
Mm-hmm.
So I have an employee that does a screening interview, and we run through a various process to make sure that they're a qualified provider. But really what we need is dynamic people, dynamic personalities. So we then have a secondary interview, and it's run entirely based off of core values. Do you match up with what we're trying to do as a company?
And did you pull a lot of this out of that, how to start a startup?
I did, yeah. So their research was all about they were trying to understand what differentiates these billion-dollar companies, these unicorns that started in an apartment, just like most companies, and then the hundreds that fail or thousands that fail and never get there. And one of their key things was a dedication to core values, and that not that it's just stated core values, like every company has a mission statement and some rigmarole of core values,
Mm-hmm.
but that they truly live them out and follow them, and they're a part of the company culture. And so even before we had a company, when it was just me thinking, I started outlining what would be my core values to make us successful.
So what are they?
So we call it our proof, but it's an acronym, and it's easy to remember that way. But P is prioritize the person. At the end of the day, the person, that employee that you talked about at Costco,
Mm-hmm.
they need to know that we're going to put their interests above anyone else's. The Costco's interests are not going to come above that person's. And if we do that, and if we take care of the people, we believe in the system to know that Costco will benefit and succeed in the long run as well. But that person's always going to know that I'm going to take care of them first and foremost. and that's key. R is recognize the opportunity. We're trying to do something special with our company, and I think we can do it better than almost anybody else out there. And so I don't want somebody that's coming to work for me because I pay well. We do pay well. We pay really well. But I don't want somebody that's coming to work for me just to collect a paycheck. They need to be excited about what we're doing, because in the long run, I'm going to push them, and I want them to be looking for opportunities to do it better.
And so recognition is what you're using. Is the core value that describes that, right?
Recognize the opportunity. So
Recognize
I want people that are not just waiting for me or our leadership to tell them what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I want people that are always seeking to find out, how can we do this better? How can I be better where I'm at company X?
Yeah.
How can I do a better job here without having to be told to do something? I want them thinking, how can I make myself better?
It's a really hard quality to find.
I agree. Very hard.
Yeah.
Our first O is one team, one team, one opportunity. That's somewhat cliche, but we really are trying to do it together. So we're really transparent with everything. We share virtually all of our information amongst our company. It's not like it's a hierarchy. I'm really, really transparent about that. And in an effort to make them feel like they're a part of what we're doing. We are doing this together.
Sure.
The second O is our world, our responsibility. So we don't, and this is the thing that weeds out the most applicants of all, and it really kind of surprises me. But my wife and I, my family, my parents, my in-laws, we all really strongly believe that we shouldn't be complaining about the world we live in if we're not willing to do something about it. And doing something about it shouldn't be, I'm getting paid to do it. You should be willing, if you really care about something, you'll spend all sorts of time messing around the internet on your phone or working on it, or, whatever your hobbies are, you'll dedicate your time to. So, a long story short, we don't hire anybody that within the year prior to us hiring them has zero, volunteer experience or activity. So, they have to have something that they've shown and dedicated themselves to free of charge over the course of last year.
Like board member of Ducks Unlimited?
Yeah,
Would that count?
like board members of Ducks Unlimited. or didn't you do some volunteer stuff at the music place where you would go check IDs or something so you could go to all the concerts?
Oh, yeah, Lions Club.
Yeah.
Lions Club's a great organization.
Yeah.
And we would go at the amphitheater in
Mhm.
Ridgefield. We would pour beers and put wristbands on people and check their ID.
Right.
And then the hourly wage that we would get, the amphitheater got a discount on us, right? So they didn't have to pay minimum wage. It was a little less than minimum wage, but all that went to the Lions Club.
Right.
Which, not to talk about myself, because we just talked about how not to do that, but people's perception of you is really important when you are in sales, right?
Right.
And so everyone knows me as a pretty successful guy in my industry. Well, at a Journey concert or I think it was Journey or Def Leppard, I was working the beer booth, and you have to wear the amphitheaters, the company that does the concessions, you have to wear their shirt. You can't wear like your own clothes. You have to wear their shirt, and you can't have your Lions Club hat on or whatever. Well, there's 8,000 people there in Clark County, and so I knew probably 1% of those people.
Yeah.
And every single one's like, oh, was work going okay? Or you're pouring beers now? So everyone thought I had done so bad at my job that I had to go pour beers at the amphitheater to make ends meet.
Nice. Nice. I like it.
There's always that on the application, right?
Right.
What's your volunteer experience, or at least on most applications. But I never thought I just thought they just want to know what I'm interested in.
So we don't screen it out on the application aspect, because everyone likes to brag about themselves on a resume. And so it's in our interview process where we really want to understand what it is and what you're doing it and how you're involved in it.
So are you finding most of these people are volunteering within the clinical industry?
No, unfortunately, what I'm finding is most people don't do it. Like I said, it's the number one factor that weeds out candidates. I bet, I don't have exact numbers, but probably 7 out of 10 candidates aren't doing anything.
Well, there's so many opportunities in the clinical world to go help, right? To
Oh, there
volunteer.
is for sure, and I don't even have to care about it. So it doesn't have to be something that my wife or I feel, passionate about. Like we have one employee, and hopefully she doesn't listen to the podcast because I'm not discounting what she does, but it doesn't resonate with me. But she regularly goes and works on the reefs in Hawaii for sea turtle habitat.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's really important to her. She does it every year and has for a long time. Personally, I don't care a whole lot about sea turtle habitat, but what I value is that she cares enough about it to give of her time to do it for free, and no benefit to her other than helping a cause that she cares about. And in turn, I think she's going to be more passionate about helping people in the workplace too, because she deeply is willing to care and commit of herself to try and make things better.
It's a different type of person that does things like that.
I agree. And I think they're the type of people we want in our building.
80% of your day you're thinking about yourself or how things impact yourself. Is that what you said?
That was the number I've heard. Yeah. But then our last core value is fanatical about service. So we're not a traditional clinician. We talked about it a little bit before. I mean, we are at the end of the day salespeople for ourselves every interaction we have.
Mm-hmm.
And, one bad interaction can have a huge impact in the culture of the company we're at. So we need to remember that the people of that facility are our customer. The company as a whole is our customer. The managers there are our customer. We need to be trying to exceed their expectations daily. And that's a foreign concept to a lot of clinicians, but I think it's really, really a key part, maybe one of the most critical parts, but that's how we build our company. Those are the people that we have that empower that or embody that. And
so run through them again, proof.
So prioritize the person, recognize the opportunity, one team, our world, our responsibility, and fanatical about service.
And you came up with those?
I did, yeah.
Nice job, man. That's awesome.
And it took me a long time. I mean, this was months, probably a couple months of me thinking through things. What is it that makes a program successful? What is it about a person that I like to work with? Because that's part of it. I'm building my own company. I want to have employees that I enjoy being around.
Yeah.
And what do I think will make the biggest impact for us and allow us to scale and do it well and do it on a big market?
So it sounds like your employees enjoy coming to work.
I think so. Yeah. So we've had in 2.5 years, we've had one employee leave for a different opportunity, and that's it. So we've kept everyone that we
and
we just build.
How many employees do you guys have now?
Yeah, we've got a handful. We've got quite a few.
Okay, so you've gone from one, yourself and your wife, to quite a few.
Yeah, more than 10. Well over 10.
In 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. So what kind of failures have you had running this business?
Yeah, good question. We've been blessed. We've been really blessed. So we haven't, knock on wood, up to this point, we haven't had any major failures. What we've had are things that are harder than others.
Okay.
And, I would say understanding how to motivate mid-level managers has been a challenge for me, because I'm a go person, and how to understand the type of people that will respond well to me, but also be an encouragement to the people that they're leading, is something I'm working through right now, and I don't know if I have figured out, but that's been a challenge for sure.
Have you read Strength Finders 2.0?
I
Are you
haven't.
familiar with it? Did we talk about this?
I'm familiar with it, but I haven't read it.
Did we talk about this at breakfast the other day?
We did, yeah.
Man, I'll tell you what. I highly, highly recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
We did it as a staff, and everyone was the whole staff was interested in it, read it in a couple days.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had a consultant come in.
Yeah.
And so you take this test, and it's 150 questions long. I would say listen to the podcast, because I did a podcast with this consultant the other day, but somebody forgot to plug the soundboard in, so we don't have it. But you answer 150 questions, and it's strongly agree or strongly disagrees, 1 through 10.
Right.
And it's questions like, do you find yourself a confidence are you a confident person?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's 150 questions, and you're supposed to answer the first number that comes in your head.
Mm-hmm.
So you're supposed to take this test extremely fast.
Right.
And I've taken a lot of these tests with these books,
Mm-hmm.
and none of them, I've never found the results to be accurate. Our results, so you get 5 strengths, and we sat down as a team before we had the consultant. We just read through everyone's strengths, and it was the most accurate thing we've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it described each of us to a T.
Really?
And then when the consultant came in, she spent the first 3 hours with the group, and it was eerie. It was like she knew about us without ever meeting us. So without spending more than a few minutes talking with us in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
she would say, I bet you react well when this person says this, for example. And they were
Mm-hmm.
right on.
Really?
So what it's done is, because culture's hard to create, but it's even harder to maintain, right?
Right.
And that's exactly where we're at. We have a great culture in my little staff.
Mm-hmm.
So now we want to make sure we're maintaining it. And Ryan, I can talk about him because he's the producer. He's not here, so I can really talk about him. But a couple of his top strengths was communication, and I think strategic, and mine was futuristic and ideation.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we know these strengths, we've taken time to talk about it and had a consultant come in.
Right.
We avoided, I think, maybe clashing heads on some ideas,
Really?
and we get along and are much more productive together, because I have a tendency to think way out in the future,
Right.
and have lots of ideas, and some ideas are probably too big
Mm-hmm.
or unrealistic, and he's the opposite. That kind of stuff drives him nuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so where maybe I'm thinking too far and too big of risks,
Right.
he's thinking too narrow-minded. He's probably not going to appreciate that. Too conservative, and we end up somewhere in the middle when we're collaborating on an idea,
Right.
like the podcast and other things. So strength, I'm going to have her back on, but Strength Finders 2.0. I can give you Becky's contact information afterwards.
Yeah, that would
But
be.
it's and the reason I brought that up was the mid-level manager, right?
Right.
Because we can over-operate in our strengths.
Mm-hmm.
So if your strength is consistency, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can over-operate in consistency.
Right.
And so you may be doing really good at the task you're doing, but this person that's trying to talk to you might be getting frustrated because they can't communicate with you because you're over-operating in that. Or maybe you need to take a time out and realizing you're being too consistent on the project you're working on, or too focused.
Right.
And so understanding how your strengths can be your weaknesses, it's kind of emotional intelligence a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but Strength Finders 2.0. I'll buy you a copy.
No, I'll check it out. Essentially that's kind of where I started with that Enneagram conversation. It's kind of the reasoning I'm diving into that is trying to understand how to be able to relate to and understand different personalities better.
But how many bosses don't take time to learn how to understand personalities better? Most bosses are jerks,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that could be true. And maybe I am one. But no, it's not easy because so for me, I make decisions really easy and really fast. And so it's hard for me. And maybe that's one of the biggest challenges I've had is as we're growing, I have to delegate and I have to give things to other people, and I can't just take it and run with it. And when it's your own company, it's a very unnerving feeling to know that they're maybe not doing it the way you want them to do, or that you would do it yourself. But I need to sit back and try and help them so that they can succeed, but at the same time be willing to allow them to fail if that's going to mean developing them and encouraging
or
them.
having success doing it a way that you want to have.
Exactly. And so I've done that on a couple key projects that was really difficult for me.
Give me an example.
Well, so we built this whole training platform, digital online training platform that was purchased by a customer of ours that we were building it from scratch. I'm good at saying, saying yes and then figuring out how to do it. and that was this. So we built this whole platform, but I didn't have the time to be hands-on, and I knew I wouldn't, and I knew if I was trying to micromanage it that I would end up putting myself into it too much, and it would slow down other aspects of our company that were too valuable to me for me to be hands-off. And so I gave it away and did weekly briefings on it, and truly was entirely hands-off. And I'd sit there in these weekly briefings and think sometimes, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you doing that? And I might even ask those questions, but I wasn't going to say, you have to do it my way. I'm going to let you guys do it. And it turned out great. It turned out far better than it probably ever would have if I did it.
Was it hard to stand on the sidelines?
Oh, it's very hard because that's not my nature. I was fortunate that I didn't really have time to be involved in it too much more than I was. So that kept me distracted. But there was times when we're doing these briefings where I was thinking, man, this isn't tracking the way I think it needs to. And that was uncomfortable for me. But I just had to trust that I've hired good people, and I think they've got a plan. They're not being haphazard about it. They were very organized with how they're going about it. And I, like I said, at the end, I think it turned out better than it ever would have if I was driving it.
So are you a goal setter?
I am. I'm big on goals.
Sorry, I'm looking at the soundboard here. Just hope that this is recording. We're going to find out in a few minutes. And have you always been a goal setter, or is this part of the how to start up a startup?
No, I've always been a goal setter, and I'm ultra competitive, and always have been from my entire life. I can't remember a time where I wasn't trying to beat somebody or win at something. And part of that is always goals have gone with that. I want to be the best at this, or I want to do this. And I mean, I can remember back in whenever you start playing basketball. So it's community ed basketball, maybe second grade, first grade, something like probably second grade. I can remember my goals. I'd set my goals. So my uncle was a superstar athlete, played professional baseball, was good at everything, but he's only 7 years older than me. So at that point, I'm 10. He's 17, a junior in high school. So my goal would always be to score more points than he would in the high school varsity game at second grade or whatever it was. I was. So I can remember setting goals as long back as I can ever remember.
So do you how realistic do you set your goals?
So, Good to Great and Jim Collins and some of his work. So he has the term big, hairy, audacious goals. Mm-hmm. So I really buy into that. So I try and always have, that big target out ahead of me. And then I'm maybe not quite as good. I'm probably more the futuristic guy that you're describing yourself as. I'm not as good at those interim, 1 and 2 year goals as I am at seeing where I want to be long term. I'm definitely better there. But
so if you were to set a goal where, I'm trying to think of a good example in your field. If you're trying to set a number goal, mm-hmm. whatever that number would represent, mm-hmm. Would you rather set your goal too high and come up short, or set your goal realistic and exceed it?
I'm definitely going to be too high, and pretty much always.
And you're okay. So like if your goal is 100 of something.
No, I'm not okay.
Okay, let's say you try it once and your goal and you hit a number of 50. Mm-hmm. So if the next time you say, okay, this time I'm going to do 100. If you do 70, mm-hmm. so you're up 20.
Right.
Are you happy or are you frustrated?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm seeing process that's going to get me to where I need to be, but I'm not settled until I'm where I want to be. And that's the competitor in me. Mm-hmm. I mean, and probably that internal confidence that I think we can succeed. I think our company, so I want to be one of the top 3 companies on annual revenue in this space in the country.
Okay.
And I want to be there in 3 years. So 5 years total was my time frame. I think that's achievable. I can tell you the top couple companies are like $30 million a year companies. They're not giant organizations like you might have in some industries, but that's huge for a physical therapy type clinic.
Sure.
Those are big organizations.
Yeah.
And so we've got a lot of work to get there. But I think it's achievable. I totally believe it's achievable. And right now we're working like crazy to try and get there. We'll see what happens, but that's the big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I have 1 month goals,
Mm-hmm.
and then I have annual goals, and then I have a 5-year goal, right?
Right.
And they're changing and everything, but when I'm setting up my annual goals,
Mm-hmm.
I do the same thing. I put a production number
Mm-hmm.
that's so high that people think I'm stupid, like people
Right.
think I'm crazy.
Right.
But if I were to set my production goal at something I think is very realistic that I can do without a lot of effort,
Mm-hmm.
and I hit it, then I think, what did I leave on the table,
Right.
right?
Right. I get it.
So I set my goals, and Ryan gives me criticism because I have a visual goal in my office. Right?
Mhm.
So we help homeowners. And so I have keys on my wall that represent how many homeowners I want to help this year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have a lot of keys on the wall. Okay. And Ryan he just looks at me like, dude, what are you thinking? And I said, if I can fulfill 75% of this,
Mm-hmm.
it'll be 25% higher than last year.
Right.
Right. But if I set the goal at 25% higher last year and I hit it, then I'm going to think, what did I leave on the table?
Right.
And it's not that that's the right way to set goals, because Ryan's the opposite. He
Mhm.
wants a goal that's really realistic, that he thinks, yes, it may take a lot of effort to get there, and he may set an audacious goal.
Mm-hmm.
But if he thinks that there's any way he's not going to want to hit that, he won't do it. He'll want, like, for example, the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get 10,000 views on one of my podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be very difficult to do,
Right.
right?
Right.
So that number stresses him out,
Mm-hmm.
right? But 300 views is a difficult number to get to, but it's much
Right.
more achievable.
Right.
So he'd like to set the goal at 300, where I'm setting the goal at 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that one's right or wrong, but my goal setting's wrong for him because it would just stress him out too much, and his goal setting's wrong for me. So everyone's different. So I just wanted to hear how your goal setting was.
So I like I tend to think that we're our biggest limiting factor. I'm my own biggest limiting factor. You're probably your biggest limiting factor. And if we choose to continually do that, we won't see what we're able to achieve. And that sounds kind of cliche, but I think it's true. I like the idea, and it's along the same lines, I guess, but you won't ever know where your limit is until you bump into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's the way I operate. And I love Facebook's slogan early on. I don't know if they still use it or not, but move fast and break things. Because if you're not breaking things, you're not moving fast enough.
Yeah.
And if you're not moving fast enough, you don't know what you can achieve. And I tend to operate that way, and I definitely break things periodically. And I don't think I've hit my limit yet, and hopefully I don't for quite a while.
Doesn't sound like you broke a lot if you haven't had any big failures yet.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've had career failures. Definitely had career failures. I mean, my path has not been just a straight line, so I don't want to give the illusion that it's been a straight line. It's had some pretty big right angle turns that I wasn't expecting. There's been two major curveballs that I don't really want to get into today, but I didn't expect them and I didn't plan them. And had I had the choice to deal with them or not, I wouldn't choose to. But where I'm at today is where I never could have imagined I'd be in, and I'm extremely grateful for it. So I don't want to come across like I've not had. I mean, everything's not been perfect. That's
well, and
for
you're
sure.
going to have failure. You're going to have big
Right.
failures. I'm lucky enough to know a lot of very successful people. One of them's the guy that owns this museum.
Right.
And I said, hey, Roger, would you want to be on my podcast? And he goes, sure. And he's like, what's it about? And I said, it's called The Hunt for Success, and it's about people that have achieved high levels of success or working on achieving high levels of success in one form or another.
Right.
And I go, I'd love for you to come on and tell your story of success. And he said, well, my failures are much more interesting.
Right.
And he said, I've had hundreds of failures and one success.
Mm-hmm.
And that really made me think a lot when he said that. So I'm excited. He's going to be on next week. So I'm excited to hear about his failures. Because he says no one asks, and you hear this a lot when you're watching personal development or you see people do this. People want to know what you've done to be successful, but what you fail as, where you can really learn from somebody, right?
Right. Well, I think it's so true and so rich that, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think I'm the smartest person. Far from it. I don't think I'm the best business person. I'm far from it. I don't think I know the most about what I do in my industry. I think I'm far from that. But what I think I am is a good combination of effort and grit and competitiveness and maybe enough humility to recognize that I don't know it all and I need to keep working.
So everything you and I talked about is great, right? But I've said this on other podcasts. One of the hot phrases in personal development when you go to these seminars and read the books, it's work-life balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. I'm not going to repeat everything I've said on other podcasts, and I get that you have to have work-life balance. But I think you're going to agree with me that the more success I have at work and the harder I work, the happier I am in my personal life, right?
Yeah.
Where a lot of people say, I'm only going to work so much so I have time in my personal life. Okay. So with how ambitious you've been getting to this point,
Mm-hmm.
and now you have everything you've worked for, you have your company, and you have big, hairy, audacious goals, are you nervous that you're going to work yourself too hard to where it affects your personal life? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. Oh, it's a good question. I mean, so I'm a go person, and I love this journey we're on. It's exciting for me. It's fun for me. And if I were completely honest, I would say my biggest fear of our company in this path that my wife and I are on is that I'll miss out and look at my boys are 12 and 14 and I'll think, what was it all for?
Mm-hmm.
And so that is by far my biggest fear. I don't want this dream and this passion and this thing that I love to end up being something that I look back on and say, was it really worth it? And so I do try and maintain priorities, my wife, my boys, time with them, and I really try and guard it. But I push and I go and I'm gone a ton. And, I think communication with my wife is really important there to make sure that I'm using her barometer as well as my own, because mine's usually, this is going great, it's going great, it's going great.
Sure.
And hers might be a more appropriate barometer of where my time is, and then I try and pull back and
So she'll bring you back down.
Definitely.
And you.
Yeah, and not like she's saying you're gone too much. You need to stop.
Yeah.
She's been the biggest supporter of what we're doing. She'll just say, is this the right time to maybe be investing in another person? And
Well, what about just turning your mind off? So when I get home sometimes, first thing is my daughter wants to play and do all this, and we'll eat dinner together and we'll play, but I have such a hard time of turning my mind off from the day that there's times where she'll sit there and be talking to me and I am not paying attention at all. I'm thinking about the
Right.
work day or what it lies tomorrow. Do you feel that way too? And are you able to turn it all off?
No, and I think when you own the company, it never shuts off. Because if something happens at 10 p.m., you got to deal with it.
Yeah.
It's not someone else that you can hand it to or wait for. So
Well, but it's not just actions you need to do outside of work, right?
right.
It's how to start a startup. That's easy to get. It's fun to get passionate about personal
Right.
development. It's fun to come up with ideas and build your business.
Right.
So do you find yourself thinking about those things
And not engaging
and
at
not?
home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always am thinking about things like that, but I enjoy that. Do I think it takes away with my boys, from my boys? I don't feel like that's a day-to-day struggle for me, but I'm always thinking about what's next, or what. Yeah, I always bring it home. But I do try and I really try and put my phone away when I get home, and so I'm not just email after email after email and responding. It can wait till the morning. I try and be cognizant of those things, but I'm sure I could be better at that.
I have a very low tolerance for people that give me a hard time about checking emails and taking phone calls outside of work.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife's the same. You know her.
Right.
I think her and your wife are probably really similar, where if we're out to dinner and I have to get up and take a call,
Mm-hmm.
I come back to the table, I'm not eating dinner with someone that's mad at me for doing that. Right? I
Right.
have friends and coworkers and stuff that their wives get really pissed,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Right.
And my wife's very supportive.
Yeah, same here. I couldn't have done what we've done without her. She's every bit as committed to this, and the effort she's put in to help, run our family and our house and everything else while I'm gone has been critical. I wouldn't have been able to do it alone, not even close.
Well, and still got a long journey in front of you. You're
For
2
sure.
years into a huge career. Right?
Oh yeah, we are nowhere where we want to be. That's for sure.
Do you have a high level of self-accountability, or do you rely on other people to help hold yourself accountable?
Yeah, good. That's a great question. So I mentioned earlier, I make decisions easy and quick, and so I knew pretty early on that I need people to ground me, because I'll just go and not. I tend to think I can make it work, and so I don't worry about it not working because I think it will, and so I need people to keep me accountable. So I got a crew of mentors before we had any clients that I meet with regularly, and different specialties, in different areas and different relationships that I have with them, but all with the focus of that they're a sounding board, but at the same time they have full autonomy to give me honest feedback. And I don't always do what they tell me to do.
Sure.
But I definitely listen to them, because they're all successful, far more than me, and I need that.
But do you ask them to like hold you accountable? Like I have, I have to have accountability,
Mm-hmm.
right? I have very little self-accountability.
Mm-hmm.
So I do it with coworkers.
Right.
I do it with systems.
Mm-hmm.
Like I set my voicemail every day
Mm-hmm.
with the date and time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a way I hold myself accountable to set that voicemail before the first phone call comes in. Because if I don't, it happens all the time. I look like an idiot because my voicemail is 2 days old.
Right.
But I also have accountability partner where every week we have a half an hour phone call. And it's just somebody else in our industry, doesn't work for our company or anything. And we talk about goals and where you're at. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll say, hey, look, next week I'm really struggling on wearing too many hats. I feel like my focus is spread thin and I'm getting everything done 80%. So next week, will you ask me how that's going?
Right.
And then so when we get close to that call, I have to look back, and I'm conscious about it all throughout the week because I know I'm going to have to answer them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's not a great example. Maybe it's I want to get a project done, or I want to work out. Monday through Friday this week at 6 a.m.
Right.
And do you do anything like that?
As far as set goals for myself and hold myself accountable.
No, have other people like these mentors.
Yeah. So I would say earlier on, much more than I do now. And really it came as a product of my schedule just getting so nuts.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I would say I do naturally build it. So we have weekly leadership team meeting that we run on kind of key metrics, and then we also so we hit each person, you got 3 minutes to run through it, but we do a high. What was your high of the week? What was your low of the week? What are you struggling with? How can I help you? and I do it myself. So I do it to the team as well.
That's perfect.
Um,
So what does
and
it say it again?
So it's our high of the week, our low of the week. What are you struggling with, and what can I help you with? And the goal is, I hate long meetings, and I hate, maybe I'm too long-winded, so I hate it when other people are long-winded. But so you got 3 minutes to do it. And when we first started, I actually had a timer running on the computer because we'd sit down for a staff meeting, and it'd be an hour and a half later. It's supposed to be a 30-minute meeting.
Yeah.
So the goal is that they're 3 minutes, and we're not perfect at this. I mean, this is all, everything we're talking about here is the best case scenario. I mean, there's bumps in some of these things. So there are weeks where we don't do it at all. But we're working on being routine with that. And what I've been working on is having them run the meeting and maybe a part of it, because I do travel a ton. And so what was happening, the biggest barrier to that was me being on an airplane somewhere and not being able to be a part of it. And so then it doesn't happen for 2 weeks, and now we're 3 weeks into it, and they haven't touched base on various projects. So I have built that accountability, I guess, now. Early on when we were starting it, I had a mentor that I met with every other week, and he really held me accountable. And where he was best, and I still use this as a litmus test for me, is he really had me identify where is my value to the company. So it's really easy for me to get tied up in all sorts of things that I think I can make better. Well, long term, where am I going to make the most benefit to this company? And it's not day-to-day stuff. At the end of the day, it is probably business development and employee morale and company culture and those things, more so than it is me being a provider or me directly managing a provider, or those are probably less influential in the long-term success of our company than me spending my time in these other areas. So I'll hold projects or ideas, especially ideas, because I'll get tons of ideas of things I want to do, to that litmus. Is this going to develop one of those 3 categories? And if it is, then great. And if not, I probably shouldn't be doing it.
So that's really interesting. So you have 3 categories that if you have an idea, it's got to fit in one of those boxes, or
Right.
else maybe you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And are those the same 3 boxes you had 2 years ago?
They're harder to stay in as we've gotten bigger, is probably the best way to put it. I think the boxes are still that. They just look slightly different. Early on, my efforts needed to be entirely focused on sales.
Sure.
I mean, that had to be number one. And if it took me away from developing sales, or on a lesser degree, making sure our system was good, I probably shouldn't be doing it at all. And I definitely walked away from things. Meeting with this mentor, and I'm saying, okay, how does it fit into these things? It's a great idea, and maybe it's something you do attack, but not probably now unless it matches up.
How valuable is it to have an outside opinion,
Right?
somebody you know cares about what you do,
Right.
what you're doing, to say that to you? Because how many people are just going to tell you what you want to hear, right?
Right. And he more or less came up with those categories as we worked on it together, but I didn't come up with them. He said, long term, these things are probably going to be the most valuable to you.
So Darren Hardy is the publisher of Success Magazine, and I did one of his online workshops,
Right.
and on there he talks about focus and priorities, and the 2 that I remember is Apple, right? Steve Jobs,
Right.
You have Sony, who comes out with 100 products a year.
Right.
Apple came out with the iPad, or the
MacBook
the iPod.
Okay.
That year they came out with 1 product, and then it was the iPad,
Right.
and then the iPhone. Or Pixar is another good example.
One movie at a time.
One movie, Toy Story. They put all their energy into one movie instead of making hundreds of movies, hoping they have 1 or 2 success.
Right.
And then the other example he gave was Warren Buffett. He says, take out a yellow notepad and write down all of your priorities. And then take the top 3 and then take the rest and throw them in the garbage.
Right.
So very similar, right? And so I did that. So I sat down, I came up with my top 3 priorities. And if I have an idea or an activity that doesn't directly impact one of those 3 priorities, then I either didn't do it or I delegated it out.
Mm-hmm.
And it really helped a ton. And this podcast is a great example.
Right.
This podcast does not impact one of my 3 priorities.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a rule, and I break it once in a while because this podcast is fun to work on.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't work on podcasts during business hours,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because it's much more fun to sit there and edit videos or edit the audio on this, or buy T-shirts that say "The Hunt for Success" on them.
Right.
But if I catch myself doing that, I have to back it off because it doesn't directly impact those 3 priorities. That's an easy example because it's outside of work, but yeah, I really think it's cool that you are doing something similar with your 3 boxes.
It's been helpful for me for sure. I just actually talked to an employee, one of my mid-level managers I'm working with, about exactly that. We need to identify what are your objectives, and then we need to organize your day around those objectives. And I'm hoping that he gets them to me in writing every week, and we work through it and review it at the end of the week and see how it's going.
Yeah.
But I agree.
Well, it's very mature to have an accountability partner like that, so you don't let your ego get in the way.
You know, I recognized early I need it just because like I said, I don't typically check on myself.
Yeah.
So I need it for sure.
Michael Jordan has a coach,
Mm-hmm.
or had a coach. Coaches have coaches.
Right.
Right.
That's true.
Some of the most successful people in my industry all have coaching,
Mm-hmm.
and they all invest in their personal development.
Right.
I like the saying, take 10% of your income and tithe,
Mm-hmm.
and then take the other 10%, and take 10% of your income and reinvest it in personal development.
Mm-hmm.
And the return of investment on that is huge.
I'm sure.
Well, it's 4:30. What do you think of the podcast?
Oh, it's been fun. I think it's about time for me to hit a restroom.
Oh, well, I didn't tell you. There's no pee break rules. You could have peed
Yeah.
the whole time. There's a bathroom right in there.
Oh, nice. I should have.
Yeah, I'm good at talking without somebody here. But no, let's go ahead and wrap it up. I'd love to have you come back and check in. And we just hit a few topics on personal development. But, I think you're a lot like me where you can sit here and talk about this stuff all day long.
I love it. I mean, I thoroughly enjoy learning more about it. So.
Let's make a commitment to each other that between now and next June, we go to some sort of event together, personal development event.
Yeah.
Whether it's a local 1-day thing or go to Vegas for a 3-day seminar,
Right.
or something. Because I think it would be fun to do that together and compare notes.
No,
And then maybe
I think
come
that
back
would
on
be.
the podcast and talk about it.
Well, that sounds good. I'm going to one. It has nothing to do with anything that would benefit you, but I am going to be in August at one for the clinical side of things. But yeah, we'll have to find something. I agree. I think it'd be fun.
Okay, let's do it. Nick, it's been a blast. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you,
Oh, just check our website out, workrightnorthwest.com, workrightnw.com.
workrightnw.com. All right, well, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
All right, thanks, everyone. And we're done.
All right. I got to take a leak.